Welcome to the Radiance Films podcast, a show dedicated to all things Radiance Films. I'm your host, Adam Lundy, and I am today joined by my They Live by Film co host, Zach Bryant. Hello, Zach.
Hello, hello, hello.
How are you doing today, my friend?
Not too bad, not too bad. How are you doing, sir?
That's great. I'm very well. We only spoke the other day.
We
uh,
we usually only talk in person like once every like 3 weeks, so this is a new standard being set.
Yes, it's weird how consistently we've been on Zoom together. For those not in the know, I do have another podcast that I co-host with Zach and another great guy called Chris Haskell, who's doing the Vinegar Syndrome podcast. Our podcast that we do is called They Live by Film. We've been doing this for nearly 4 years now, which is crazy. So if you like just kind of general film discussion as opposed to sort of Batuk specific stuff, go check out They Live by Film. There is a new episode out right now that just dropped the same day as this, where we talk about some Fritz Lang movies. So, if you're interested in that stuff, maybe have a poke along. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about some Radiance films. Um, so you might be wondering why we're back a little bit early, and you may have spotted the title of this episode and kind of guessed what we're going to be doing. Obviously, the initial plan for this podcast would be a monthly show where we talk about releases and the upcoming announcements and stuff like that. Um, but it dawned on me with the help of Zach because we were having a talk about it, and it dawned on me that there's so many films that Radiance have released that I'll otherwise never get to talk about. Because obviously we started this podcast 18 months into Radiance, being in existence. Um, so I can't say it's going to be every month, but I'm going to try at least once a month to also drop an episode like this. It's going to be subtitled The Vault, where myself and a guest are going to pick, two, sometimes three films, maybe if we want to tackle a box set, from the back catalogue that Radiance Films has already released and just talk about them. It's going to be fairly straightforward, like that, just a film discussion episode, but obviously for Radiant specific titles. Um, I invited Zach on, one, because, he helped formulate this idea for me, and two, he's probably the most knowledgeable guy I know when it comes to horror films. And despite Radiance not having a huge back catalogue of horror, they do have some horror films there. And we're going to talk about two of them today. And the first one that we're going to talk about is Messiah of Evil, which was released last year. It was released in November 2023. It was the first of Radiance's kind of special edition single disc releases. They had done box sets up until this point, but this was the first one that they put out in its own hardcover case that was just for a single edition of a film. And they've only done that once since, which would be the next film that we talk about. So there is a tangible connection between the two titles we're talking about here today. But with Messiah of Evil, if you haven't picked up the release, I'll just kind of read you the blurb that comes, on with the disc. So a woman arrives in a sleepy seaside town after receiving unsettling letters from her father, only to discover the town is under the influence of a strange cult that weeps tears of blood and hunger for human flesh. That pretty much tells the tale of it. Um, I'd heard of Messiah of Evil as it's kind of one of these cult horror films that you stumble across and is kind of become more popular over the last few years, especially compared to how it started life when it was first released. I'd heard of Messiah of Evil. I'd never seen it until this edition came out. And I really enjoyed it. And I know, Zach, you're in the same boat. It was one of these films that was on your radar, but you hadn't gotten a chance to actually see it.
Yeah, I had and honestly, I think one of the reasons it took me so long is I think it and Next of Kin had like announcements. They're two different labels, but I think I watched Next of Kin, but I got kind of mixed up in my head. So when you said Messiah of Evil, I was like, have I seen that? And when I was like, I had to read it. I was like, no, I have definitely not seen this one.
Yeah. I think I stumbled across it on it might have been like the Letterbox top horror films list, or maybe they shoot zombies or something like that. And it was the poster that kind of drew me into it. Yeah, the
You talking about like
poster.
the pure black one with like the crying blood kind of look?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And the main Mariana Hills kind of like with the white skin tone and stuff. It really has an old like ironically considering what we're going to be talking about next, it has like a Mario Bava style kind of Italian like Euro horror style to the poster. And I always thought that it was really cool, but I just never gotten a chance to see the film until this edition dropped. Um, which I'll say the print that was used was fantastic. This was obviously a very low budget film. The filmmakers themselves are quite interesting. I don't know if you had a chance to kind of do a bit of background on the filmmakers here, Zach. Um,
I did some, but I almost feel like I can't do it justice because I'd read like these most random things, like different
yeah.
titles they tried, it being incomplete, re-edited. I was like, this seems like a whole thing where I'm maybe the box set since I don't have this one. Maybe it has a whole lot of information on it.
Well, I'll come to that anyway. From a special features point of view, it does have a lot. It is quite packed, but like just in terms of just doing some basic digging on this. So the director slash producer slash writer combo of this is Willard Hook and Gloria Katz. They were married. They were a husband wife kind of duo that got into filmmaking. Obviously, this was their kind of independent film, but they actually got involved then with some really famous films. They actually co-wrote Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh, that
Um,
fits weirdly now that you
yeah,
say
it does. It
that.
does. It does weirdly fit, and you'll also hopefully agree that this other one fits as well. They also wrote the screenplay for American Graffiti,
Oh,
the
okay.
George
Okay.
Lucas film. So it does weirdly fit this whole kind of idea of Americana meets the what's the word I'm trying to think of, the occult, I guess. Americana versus the occult. It almost fits the American Graffiti slash Indiana Jones Temple of Doom. They also wrote and directed Howard the Duck, if if
That's
that floats your boat.
I'm glad they're very eclectic. I guess we'll go with that.
Very, very, very eclectic indeed. So they're an interesting duo. This film, like I said, is obviously their kind of opus from an independent filmmaking standpoint. Like I said, the this was a very low budget. It was less than $1 million. I don't have the exact figure, but I reliably have information that it was shot for less than $1 million. It didn't make very much money. It ended up getting shopped around quite a bit, even under different titles.
Yeah, they got
And
sued by Romero at one point, didn't they? Like I
yeah,
think I read that.
for
Yeah.
using, yeah, and I don't even know if it was them specifically. I think it's more to do with the distributors. Whatever distributor had it at the time slapped a of the Dead, title on it rather than Messiah of Evil, which is such a cooler title.
Which is
Um,
kind of funny because I mean I don't know, I guess where it's in different countries, but you know how many like movies ripped off of the Dead series like in Italy, but I
yeah,
guess that's a whole lot harder to do anything about when it's overseas.
well, that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. So it is definitely harder to do that stuff. But if you're going around California shipping your film as, whatever of the Dead, I'm gonna assume that whoever who owned the rights to the Of the Dead franchise, whether it was Romero or a producer, probably weren't too best pleased.
So what year
Um,
did this come out? Was it 74?
this film was released in 1974. Yeah, that's when it
Okay.
had its debut at, I believe it was a festival. I can't remember exactly which festival it
So this
was.
is only 6 years after Night of the Living Dead and
Correct.
2 years before Dawn. Okay, so that's interesting.
Correct. And
Because
that's not, yeah.
this is the only time Romero could sue anybody because Night of the Living Dead is going to go in the public domain in like 4 years.
And it's so interesting as well. Yeah, that's definitely interesting too. But it's so interesting that, as you said, Dawn of the Dead came after this, but it feels like so many things in Dawn of the Dead are also touched here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Both there's the obvious scene in the supermarket, where the kind of horde of undead chase down one of the protagonists. But there's also that kind of underlying idea of sort of consumerism and society breaking down under the guise of a leader and what have you. That's so kind of it runs through the Dead series, especially with Dawn of the Dead. The fact that the whole thing takes place in a shopping mall is just it's like Romero's hitting you over the head, with the idea that this is a stab at modern consumerism. And I think it's a bit more subtle in this film, but it's certainly there. So it is interesting that it, like you said, it came out, a couple of years before Dawn of the Dead. Um, and I
And
think this,
you sold this up to me.
yeah,
You
go
go
ahead.
ahead. You're good.
No, go ahead. I think you're going to make a point that I'm going to make anyway.
No, I was gonna say I remember you kind of sold this to me, and I saw you. I think you put it in another chat too that this is kind of like a proto Carpenter movie, and also
Hmm.
it had like some Romero flair. And I think one of the things I kind of noticed watching it was it does have like this kind of European feel to it. Like I think Dawn of the Dead does as well, especially like with all the Italian stuff, like influence and stuff going on with Dawn. um that I kind of almost felt like this had like this really weird like, and maybe it's because of the occult stuff, but I was like, this feels so much more European than I would expect from like an American horror movie.
Yeah, you make 2 points really that I think are very interesting. With the proto Carpenter stuff, for me, the reason why I thought that and why I kind of said it was that I find with a lot of John Carpenter films, especially stuff like, Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness and The Fog, they're very much kind of vibes over
Mm-hmm.
plot.
Yes.
And I definitely get the same thing with Messiah of Evil. It's certainly it cares a lot more about its aesthetics and its vibes than it does the actual plot. And I don't think that was necessarily a conscious choice by the filmmakers. I think it's just one of those things like with a lot of low budget films, plot kind of goes out the window. You film what you can film and you put it together afterwards and see what you get. So I don't know if it was necessarily a purposeful decision to kind of lax a little bit on the plot and kind of lean more into the vibes. But I find that a lot with John Carpenter films, that a lot of his films kind of lean more on that than the plot itself, which is why I kind of compared it to that. This film in particular reminded me a lot of In the Mouth of Madness. I got a lot of kind of reminders of that kind of small town setting and things like that. It reminded me a lot of it. Um,
And Kane as a character almost seems like the main guy in this. What's Michael? Was that the
I think his name is Tom.
Oh, it's
The
Tom, but I think the
character's name,
actors.
the actor's name is Michael Greer. Yeah, Tom is
That's what I'm
the
thinking of.
character's name.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. It does feel like almost like the same breed of person kind of
Yeah,
going on there.
just someone who's endlessly curious, and kind of wants to get to the end of things, even if it might kill him. Um, and on the European side of things, funnily enough, for a long time, pretty much from the time I first saw the poster to when I actually started getting interested to watch it, I actually thought this film was European. I assumed that this was like an Italian horror film, mainly because the way that Mariana Hill is portrayed on the poster, she looks so much like Barbara Steele
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
on the poster. I just assumed that it was Barbara Steele. Um, and then when I actually kind of looked into the film and I was like, wait, 1973, American, no Barbara Steele, what's going on? And then I was like, okay, I've got this film like completely wrong. Um, but you're right to also think about that kind of European influence as well, even if, again, if it wasn't purposeful. On the special features, Kat Ellinger has a really great video essay about the influence of Gothicism on this film,
Okay.
both initial kind of European Gothicism and then more into like the Edgar Allan Poe and then Southern Gothic and stuff like that. Just how the the feel and the kind of underlying themes of like madness and rejection and the fear of the unknown and stuff like that obviously plays a huge part in this film, and there are obviously underlying themes from Gothicism as well. You have the whole Lovecraftian stuff kind of on the side there as well. Um, and Kat Ellinger does a great job on her video essay, kind of mapping out how different eras of Gothicism influence this film or seemingly are connected to this film in different ways. Um, so if you look at it through that lens, you're certainly not off the mark by saying the film feels European, because obviously that's where Gothicism came from. So even though there's no crumbling castles or it's not like a Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe film, by any means in terms of the sets and stuff like that. It's obviously still a quintessentially American setting, California, small town. Feels like something like out of like American Graffiti or out of a film noir or something, or even more so out of a Stephen King book, which again
Hmm.
is another, I kept thinking of Stephen King when I was watching this film as well. Um, so even though it doesn't have a traditional Gothic setting, it does a great job of sort of transposing that into a contemporary setting. If that makes
And,
sense.
and I think like for me, what it kind of brought out for me was I think a lot of European horror is really good at liminal horror,
Mm.
and this movie just feels really like very liminal. Like they're almost like there's no full focus anywhere. It's just like this in between sort of thing. Like the whole movie is almost like they're in this in between of the real world and whatever
Yeah.
is going on here. It's kind of what you talk about the Lovecraftian stuff. It doesn't feel like reality. And when they're at like Point Dune and stuff, it feels very dreamlike, things like that, which I think is very interesting because it's Prince of Darkness. I think is a really good comparison to that in a lot of ways, and in Mouth of Madness too.
Yeah. There's definitely that kind of dreamy atmosphere. I don't know if it's like the soft photography that's used a lot during the film, a lot of soft focuses, and uh, I feel like a lot of stuff was used on the camera to kind of get that kind of dreamy feel. It feels like every scene is like the dream at the end of Carrie, that kind of soft
Mm-hmm.
feel that I'm talking about. There's so many scenes that kind of have that look, despite, them all taking place, quote unquote, in reality. Um, and there's obviously the underlying kind of threat of the unknown, this man in black, which again kind of alludes to Stephen King a little bit. This kind of man in black that is apparently going to come back and take over the town, then take over the world. But it's never really explained who he is properly, or why or how he does all these things.
Which you would
So
get complete with a Stephen King novel in about 800
oh,
pages.
absolutely, we would get everything from his entire background, and we'd also learn the backstory of the shopkeeper, and we'd learn the backstory of the person who works in the theater, who lets the other character into the theater to go watch a movie. We'd learn all about her backstory. We'd learn about everything. It'd be 2,000 pages long, and it will still be great. Um, Me and Zach are both Stephen King fans, so
Yeah,
we're allowed to
no
we're
stone left unturned when it comes to King. This is a little bit more ambiguous.
a little bit more
Of what's
abstract,
yeah.
absolutely. And what's great as well about this film is that like there is like some moments of like blood and gore and stuff. Well, I wouldn't even call it gore really. Blood flows
No.
a little bit in this film, but it's really great at being restrained in other moments. My
It almost feels more 60s than 70s in that regard. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
like it's
Like how
almost
do
like
we
they were
hide what we want to do?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And they didn't have to, because it's 1973. I'm sure there's all kind of sleaze being
It is
strung out right
Texas
now.
Chainsaw Massacre comes out, which is also hides a lot, but it's a little bit more we want you to think it's very bloody instead of this, which is a little bit more, I guess, classy.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose classy maybe is the right word. Like the scene that I was kind of that's been kind of stuck in my head since I watched it is in the sort of supermarket when the character goes in, and I can't remember why she goes to the supermarket, but she goes there
She's
for
getting chased. She's following that woman, is what it is. She sees
okay.
that woman and she keeps trying to like get her attention.
Okay. So she goes in there for plot reasons.
Yeah, like
Um
minor plot
yeah,
reasons.
and there's that great shot where the townsfolk are all at the butcher aisle eating the raw meat, and they start chasing after her. And the part when they catch her, the way that they edit it, where they kind of flash to them all kind of congregated over her, and then flash away to an aisle and
Mhm.
flash back and flash away and flash back. You don't see anything. It's not like, Shaun of the Dead where you see all the entrails getting dragged out. You know, it's in no way gory. You don't see a single drop of blood. all you hear are screams and flashes of images, and it's masterful filmmaking
But
because
it reminded me of because I did go with the preconcept of John Carpenter, but I was thinking of the scene at the end of Halloween where you have the breathing Michael and it just flashes to different things like you've seen
yes,
already. Yeah.
that's right. Actually, I didn't put that connection together, but that is like that. Um, and yeah, the way it flashes kind of back momentarily to her before flashing away, it's the film, it's that old trick of the filmmakers letting you put it all together in your head. Like in Psycho, where we never see the knife go in, but the way it's edited, it's like, of course the knife went in. He stabbed her, but we
Yeah.
never we never
It's just
actually
you're lost
see
in the
it.
chaos sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's almost like this, and it was a really powerful scene. And the other one as well, of course, is the one in the theater, which is a fantastic scene. Where another one of the kind of hippie chicks is there kind of watching this weird grindhouse western movie. Um,
What were they? Kiss Me Tomorrow. There was I looked at the name and now I've forgotten what it
yeah,
is.
I'll be able to find it because it is a real film apparently. It wasn't like, made for this. It is apparently a real movie. Let me see.
I know I looked it up. Like I even looked up
Yeah,
what the movie was about because I thought it might like add something, and now I'm just blanking on what it was.
yeah, that's really annoying because I can't find it either. And I definitely saw it written down somewhere. It has a typical kind of grindhouse name.
And I
Mm,
mean, just think if this movie was made like a decade later, they'd definitely be showing Night of the Living Dead
Probably
because it would have
would.
been free.
Probably would show Night of the Living Dead. Would have been free and thematically connected. They could do a wink at the
Yeah.
camera. Um, but it's, and again, this kind of comes down to how murky the plot is, I mean, in a good way. That like these people are not really zombies. These are not Romero, I want to eat your brain zombies. They're almost more like vampire thralls in how they behave because in a normal zombie movie, you know, the protagonist would see the zombies come in, freak out, and then they would all congregate and attack her, and it would all be limbs flailing, blood everywhere, blah, blah, blah. But in this movie, the zombies sit down and start watching the film with her, um, which is so weird. It's such a weird thing. And I know it wasn't that weird this time because again, you know, zombie movies just weren't a thing outside of Romero and the kind of like earlier ones, like I Walked with a Zombie, but they're like different altogether. So the zombies that we know now are not the same as what they were in 1973, 1974. So for us now looking back, for me, it's weird watching this scene where they all just sit down and start watching the movie. It's only when she freaks out, the rest of them kind of freak out. In a way, it's almost like they think she's one of them because they're all doing this kind of routine thing of sitting down and watching the movie and she's doing it too. And it's only when she kind of breaks the mold that they kind of congregate and start attacking her,
Which,
which
this is just kind of coming off the cuff, but it almost feels like how an outsider feels going to like a small town. Like almost like all eyes are on you, people just staring. And then when it's obvious you're not from there, it's like something just feels off.
that's the thing. It's like if you can walk the walk, then you can normally get away with things in these situations. So it's only when you stumble and make a mistake, you know, like you said, it's kind of all eyes are on you at that stage. Then people realize that you're an outsider. It's like it's like the end of Invasion of the Body Snatchers
Mm-hmm.
when Donald Sutherland is approached by the other kind of main character, and she's like, "Oh, we got to get out of here," blah blah blah, and he does the face and the pointing,
Yeah.
which is awesome. Um, it's almost kind of like that, or like in a lot of zombie movies where it's like let's pretend to be like in Shaun of the
Shaun
Dead.
of the Dead. Yeah.
Yeah, let's pretend to be the zombies and we'll hopefully get through. Um, but again, like what's interesting then when you look at it, that's all great in a modern context, but if you put yourself into the mind of someone in 1973, 1974, this is new. You know,
Hmm.
these are not existing tropes. These are something that these filmmakers who, are clearly very talented, based on the things that they went on to do, writing, Indiana Jones movies and stuff like that. Um, so these are very intelligent people creating tropes and creating, imagery that would then go on to be used by much more famous filmmakers and much more famous films. Um, so like in a way, Messiah of Evil almost feels ahead of its time because of that.
And I want to, if you ever get the chance, I actually think you'd like it based on liking this. It reminded me a lot of Dead and Buried. That was a Blue Underground release. I think it came out in like the early 80s. Has a lot of that same feel. I actually think you'd really like it. And of course, anybody else listening who wants to do a double feature, I think it's worth doing. They have like a lot of that
I need to.
weird town similarity thing going on.
I'm certain that I know the poster for this movie, so I'm just looking it up. Yes,
It
I
should,
do.
yeah, yeah. The
I
poster's pretty famous.
Yeah, I do. I've definitely heard. Well, actually, I know nothing about the movie now, but obviously now you've told me. But it's about kind of a town gone mad kind of a thing. But I definitely know this poster, so I'll have to put that on my watch list to pick that up. Um, One other just kind of random thought on this. There's a there no the no, and this is again a kind of prescient thing because obviously it's become such a staple of slasher movies down the line. But know the crazy old guy who tries to warn everybody about everything that's
Crazy
going.
Ralph. I'm glad you thought
Yeah,
of it.
this film is Crazy Ralph. He was so familiar looking at it, so I looked it up, and the guy who played him is called Elisha Cook Jr. And he's a big character actor. He always kind of plays a sad sack. I've seen him in tons of stuff, and you will have seen him as well. He was in The Killing. He was in Shane. He was
Man.
in where are we? House on Haunted Hill. He was in Day of the Outlaw. One
So a
Eyed
lot of
Jack.
this is like the end of his. I don't know how long he went after this, but this is pretty late in his career too, from the sound of it.
Kind of, yeah. Like he
Yeah.
was he was doing a lot of character work in the 40s and the 50s. He was in like a lot of film noirs, kind of as the sad sack character. I actually watched another one of his films just purely by accident recently. It was called Phantom Lady, a film noir, and he plays a jazz drummer who's, easily swayed by the main character. It's another kind of a sad sack character. It's kind of his that was kind of his character that he played in a lot of films. He was always this kind of guy who was easily pushed around. He's the guy in The Killing that gets kind of roped into. I think he's the teller, the teller at the
Oh yes, yes,
racetrack.
yes.
Yeah, the one who kind of gets roped into being involved in the heist. Who has the weapon of a wife. Um,
Yeah, that
so
all makes sense now. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So
yeah,
I was watching it and I was like, this dude looks so familiar. I've definitely seen him in something. And then I pulled up Letterboxd to go, oh shit, I've seen him in a lot. He's just one of these character actors, but he's great in this. And yeah, he's the crazy Ralph of this movie, where he's like telling everybody exactly what's going to go wrong over the next 80
yeah. He's the
minutes.
smartest person in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. It always ends up being that way. And like with all crazy Ralphs, he like gets killed immediately by the bad guy.
Of course,
Because it
he's
just
warned people for this long, but now that it's the movie, he's got to go.
exactly that is it. Um, so as I said, like when this film first came out, it was in a really, really nice special hard case. There's great special features. There's a booklet in the original version. Special features are excellent as well. There's a an hour-long documentary about the kind of making of the film, the themes behind it, as well as that video essay that I mentioned as well. I know that there is a kind of standard edition. Well, at least there was a standard edition.
Because I'm probably gonna order it when I get paid. But yeah,
Yeah. Oh yeah, there was like a yeah, so there was like a special so the original release was a special edition in the hard case. Then there was a standard edition. Well, like, sorry, there was a special edition which wasn't in the hard case, but still had a Scanavo case and had the booklet and stuff. And now there is a kind of standard edition. Doesn't look to have the booklet, but it does still have all the other special features that I
Reminds
mentioned.
me of like Arrows kind of thing.
Very, very
Yeah,
similar, very
yeah.
similar vibe, which makes sense considering where Fran came from before starting Radiance. So does indeed make sense. Um, cool. Any final thoughts on Messiah of Evil, Zach?
Uh, just that I'm glad we got together to do this because it probably would have been forever since until I watched it. And it was great.
Yeah, it
It'll
was on
probably
my
end up being the
watch list.
first.
It was on my watch list forever as well.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be the first Radiance thing I end up buying. It was either going to be that or Miami Blues. I need to get that as well,
Oh yeah, that was a
uh,
great one.
which we can plug. We talked about on They Live by Film,
That's
so
true,
we did a
actually.
Radiance episode.
We've actually done two Radiance episodes on They Live by Film because you weren't there for the second one.
That's right.
We did one episode where we talked about Miami Blues and A Woman Kills. Yeah,
Yeah,
A Woman
I
Kills.
don't remember that one as well.
Yeah. And then me and Chris did an episode where we went through the End of Civilization set. So if you're
That's
listening
right.
to those, if you want to hear those, those films get talked about, I'll link the episodes in the description if you do want to go check those out. Because I probably won't be covering those films in this segment because of that, because I've already talked about them. So if you want to hear my thoughts on the End of Civilization set, Miami Blues, or A Woman Kills, I'll link those in the description for our other podcast, They Live by Film, and you can check that out as well if you're interested. Um, so we'll move on, and we're moving back in time to 1965, and we're going to be talking about the Mario Bava film, Planet of the Vampires, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the only other, at the time of recording, is the only other single film to have its own kind of hardcover case, which again, like Messiah of Evil, has now sold out, but there is a standard edition available. And that one is still available, if I remember correctly. I'm just going to double check here because I don't want to be lying to people.
There in the US, we're getting a standard in October. I think I sent you that one. I don't know if it's the
Looks
same.
like it's the
Yeah.
same here in Region B as well. So in October, there's a standard edition. So you can pre-order that right now on the Radiance website or from wherever the partner is in the US. I assume it's
Orbit DVD,
Orbit. Yeah.
Grindhouse, somebody like
the
that.
usual the usual places then if you're in the US. That's cool. The original version was released, it wasn't that long ago, it was the end of May. 27th of May is when the special edition came out. So the fact that it's already sold out and a standard was got into production for pre-order kind of says it all about how people were excited about this one. I think that excitement comes along with the fact that it's a Mario Bava film. He's a beloved genre filmmaker. Um, I think I'm sure that we've covered Blood and Black Lace
We did
before
that. We
on
did a
Daily by
Jolly
Film.
episode with Deep Red.
Yeah, I was thinking that
Yeah,
was the case. So, I'm a decently sized Baba fan. I'm not going to say I'm a Baba super fan. I'm a decently sized Baba fan. I've seen, including this one, I've seen five of his films: Blood and Black Lace, Black Sunday, Bay of Blood, The Whip and the Body, and then Planet of the Vampires.
you should
Um,
probably watch The Girl Who Knew Too Much. I actually think you would really like that one.
Girl Who Knew Too Much. I have it right here. Let me add it to my watch list.
Yeah,
So that makes my life easier. So I won't have to message you later and ask, what was that movie you said? Um, so like I don't. Well, I'm gonna say I haven't. I've at least liked every film that I've watched. Blood and Black Lace, I think, stands above everything else. But pretty much
I
everything
agree.
else I've seen is pretty good. He's a great genre filmmaker. As far as I could tell, this was his only kind of foray into like I want to say pure science fiction. Um, Obviously he's primarily known for his horror films. He pretty much birthed the giallo subgenre. Um, Even though Deep Red perfected it, Blood of Black Lace definitely kind of kick-started it and put a lot of the tropes in place for what would come later on down the line.
He walked
Uh,
so Argento could run.
yeah, pretty much, pretty much. Um, Planet of the Vampires has some interesting kind of stuff that would kind of crop up again in genre films down the line that we'll touch on. Just in case anyone hasn't, read it, the blurb, or doesn't really know what it's about, just again to read you the blurb from the Letterboxd release, or no, the Radiance release. Um, in the outer reaches of deep space, the spaceship Galliot answers a distress signal from Aura, an unexplored planet. As the ship attempts to land, members of the crew inexplicably begin to attack one another. This is the start of a terrifying expedition into the unknown, one plagued by paranoia, possession, and violent mayhem wrought upon the unsuspecting explorers by the planet's mysterious inhabitants. Um, so yeah, in terms of plot, it's your pretty standard sci-fi horror plot. Space travelers end up in a precarious situation due to a dodgy uh, distress signal. It's fairly basic in its plot, and I will say this is another film, kind of like Messiah of Evil, that is maybe light on the plot, but does have a lot of vibes. So this is a good vibes versus plot episode, and how two films maybe one film can maybe do it a little bit better than the other. Um, I like
I think
Planet
the
of
way
Vampires, but yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think the way I would describe them, kind of using that, is these are both movies I would put on during like a Halloween party. I
Mm,
think the difference is like Messiah of Evil, I could see people kind of like getting drawn into, and Planet of the
mhm.
Vampires is just like nice to go with the background. The
Okay.
sets look great, the sets look awesome. That's the way it kind of feels to me.
It's a really nice looking film. That's definitely the best thing I can say about Planet of the Vampires, that it really looks great. The set design, the costume design, the way it's all filmed and put together, the film looks really, really good. The set design in particular is really excellent. Um, like I said, the plot that I read there, that's pretty much like the first 10 minutes of the movie and then like the last 10 minutes of the movie. And then like in between, it's just let's walk around the planet vibes. The meat and potatoes of the plot are in the first and the last 10 minutes. And the middle things are just kind of like just happening. We're just here on the planet. We're just kind of exploring and stuff like that. Which is, not necessarily a bad thing. And I'm sure a lot of people love that. For me, I would have liked a little bit more to the plot for me to say that I love it. But I do like the film, and I completely agree with you. Like, you could definitely throw this on the background at a party or at an art installation or something, and just the way that it looks will get people interested, and it will catch people's eye, because of how great it looks.
And, I originally thought, I was like, did this come out the same year, around the same year as Planet of the Apes? But it actually came out like 3 years earlier.
Mm,
And I was almost sitting there like, I wonder if how different this movie would be if it came out afterwards, because Planet of the Apes is a little bit more plot focused. Um, they're only comparable in like very superficial ways, but it's almost like kind of a similar idea of that space exploration and seeing a different, I guess we'll say, planet without spoiling, I guess, a 50-year-old movie. Uh, but it's kind of fascinating to kind of what you talk about is like it definitely think could have done more with a little bit more plot. Where I think I need a little bit more to like carry me through.
yeah. I suppose the best film that one could kind of hold it up against, and it feels a little bit unfair to do it, but with the similarities, you kind of have to. But like, with Alien,
Mhm.
um, everything that this film does in the entire runtime is what Alien does in the first 30 minutes, and then it lets the rest kind of become that kind of cat and mouse, and let's try and escape this kind of dark entity that's made its way onto our ship. Um, Whereas what Planet of Vampires does kind of bookends, it takes the first 30 minutes of Alien. Well, I can't say it takes it because obviously Alien came out so much later.
Mhm.
But, if we can just say hypothetically, this film takes the first 30 minutes of Alien and then kind of just drags that out over, 80 odd minutes, however long this film is. Um, so yeah, I feel like there's probably a little bit of lost potential in what they could have done with the story. Um, I feel like it would be unfair to compare it story-wise to Planet of the Apes, because Planet of the Apes had the benefit of being based on a novel.
Yeah, that's true
So
too.
they're
Yeah, for
naturally going
sure.
to have more to work with. Um, Whereas this is, at the end of the day, like this is a cheaply made Italian sci-fi horror. It's a genre film, it was made just to put out and get people sort of looking at freaky stuff and make some money. It wasn't made with a ton of artistic sort of ambitions, I would assume. So I have to give it props that it does, have some great things about it in terms of the look and the flair. That's probably, it's probably down to Bava. Um,
Yeah, because I was just looking at a curiosity. There's like 10 screenwriters on this movie.
yeah, it's kind of
It's
crazy.
insane.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. Like this does almost feel like a little bit like it was like I haven't actually looked into the production side of things to actually verify if this is correct, but it almost feels like a director for hire gig. Like
Yeah, because Bava is one of the screenwriters, but it almost seems like he came in after there was a story made and said, "Okay, let me fix it to my liking."
yeah, I did some revisions and stuff like that. That makes sense. Uh just trying to see if I can just quickly find out um what the situation was, if this was a case where they approached Bava or
Oh,
so.
and
Go ahead, yeah.
oh, I was just seeing like I just saw this where it said "It, the Terror from Beyond Space," this and Dark Star were considered primary influences for Alien, which
Oh
is
yeah.
pretty cool. I didn't even put the Dark Star. That kind of fits too, actually.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Like I think the alien influences are pretty strong here. Like the whole distress signal to a strange planet and
Yeah,
stuff like
that
that.
popped out.
Yeah, and then there's even that kind of moment with the giant skeleton.
Oh,
Um
almost like seeing the space jockey
the
for the
space
first time.
jockey.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, exactly. I believe that there's even a quote going around from was it Dan Bannon? Yeah, Dan
Yeah,
Bannon,
Dan O'Bannon.
Dan
Yeah,
O'Bannon.
which
Oh
he was
yeah.
one of the writers for Dead and Buried, so it all connects. It all connects back.
Here's the quote. Decades later, Dan O'Bannon would admit, I stole the giant skeleton from Planet of the Vampires. So there you
That's
go.
I love it. That's one thing I do like about Dan O'Bannon. He was always honest about his influences.
Yeah. I can't find any hard information as to whether or not, this was a case where Bava came in late, but it doesn't look as though it was the case because the producers of this film had produced a lot of Bava's other films and they had a successful relationship and a good working relationship. So it does seem like this probably wasn't a gig for hire. Um,
They just couldn't figure out what to do with the story, I
it
guess.
seems that's what the
Yeah.
problem is, and it might have been a case where
Cool
there's all
title.
that.
What do we do with it?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, and the Italian title is Terror nella Spazio, which is terror in space.
Wow, we got a
Uh,
way better title in the
yeah,
English.
the actual the translated title is nowhere near as cool as Planet of the Vampires. Um, um, But yeah, it could have been a case where it was like, too many cooks spoil the
Yeah.
broth or whatever that old adage is, with there being so many writers involved. And then there's also that thing as well, like with it being an Italian production, half the cast don't even speak the same language and it's dubbed which way or the other. Actually, did you watch it in Italian or English? What was the version
English
that
was what I found on YouTube.
you watched it on English? Cool, cool, cool. Yeah. The Radiance version does include both. I watched it in English as well because I didn't feel like I was going to lose much by watching it in Italian. Um, so I don't think I've lost out on much because the main actor didn't speak Italian on the
Well, this is
set.
probably
So
blasphemous to some listeners, I'm sure, but I've always said the two things you can watch dubbed are like animation films
yeah,
and Giallo films because it doesn't matter. It
yeah.
just doesn't matter.
You can even just widen Giallo to just Italian movies from this era because they were
Yeah.
dubbed anyway. They weren't recording the sound on set. that you don't have a choice but to watch them dubbed, whether it's in Italian or whether it's in English, they're dubbed regardless because they weren't recording sound on the day. So whether it's a giallo or a spaghetti western or a polizia tecce or whatever, they weren't recording sound there, so you're watching it dubbed either way. It's just about whether you want to read the subtitles or not, because either way, it's getting dubbed by somebody. Um, so there's that. But yeah, the main actor in this was a guy called Barry Sullivan, who, uh, was mainly a TV actor. Not a big name. Um, was in a couple of things that I recognize. Was in 40 Guns. It's a Sam Fuller film. He was in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, which is probably a film that you'd be
Oh
more
wait, who was
familiar
he in
with,
that?
Sam Peckinpah. I assume he probably wasn't anyone big. Let me pull up the
I'm
cast.
gonna.
He
I'm
was a guy
curious. I
called
just watched that
John
recently.
John Chisholm, whoever that is.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
So I assume you recognize that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
do. I just watched it like 2 weeks ago, so
okay,
that works
that's
out.
that's interesting. It's like me with Elisha Cook Jr. Accidentally watched two of his films in quick succession. Um, But yeah, as I said, he was speaking English there, so I didn't see much issue with watching the English dub because that's what he was speaking. But like, yeah, to be fair to this film, you know what? Actually, I'm gonna give props to this film, right? So the budget of this film was $200,000. It made 90 million in Italy.
I mean, and honestly, like even though I know we're talking about an older movie here, the sets look fantastic for $200,000.
Oh, they
Like
look great. Yeah,
it's so good. It's really good.
that must have been where like 190,000 of the dollars went, and the
Yeah,
rest
because
of the
I
10 was like, let's just pull in these random people to be in this movie. Whoever's
and I
on
mean,
holiday in Italy this week can be in it.
yeah, I mean, because I mean, even admitting like I'm not. This is me bad mouthing Planet of the Apes. I say as like just if we were going purely on how they look, I would say this looks a little bit better. And I'm
Yeah.
sure Planet of the Apes costs more money.
Oh, for sure it did. Um, and whenever I think about this movie, I actually always forget about how old it is. I forget that it's 1965. I always assume it's early 70s.
Yeah,
And then I'm
I
like,
would
wait,
I would
no,
agree
this
with
was
that.
1965. It looks like for its time, especially, it looks ahead of its time. The sets look fantastic, as we said. I think both of us really feel very similarly about the film. We both just wish there was maybe a little bit more meat on the bone from a plot standpoint. Because
Though
there's
I will
definitely some
admit,
interesting
I've gotten like
ideas.
more appreciation like talking about it. So
As soon as you realize it was directly influencing Alien, you're like, oh, I'm in.
yeah, like
I like this movie now.
yeah, like it's a little bit better for me now.
Fabulous. Any more final thoughts on Planet of the Vampire, Zach? I think we've covered everything I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's going to be one I could see myself throwing on like during October at some
Hmm.
point again. Just like maybe it'll do better with me with like when I'm in that type of mood because I did watch it early this morning, which may have not been the best time to watch it, admittedly. Uh,
Yeah, awesome. Perfect. Look, thank you again, Zach, for joining me on this first episode of The Vault. Not going to put a hard sort of stance on how often these are going to be coming out. I'm going to do another one next month with a pretty significant kind of content creator for boutique stuff.
Very
That'll be out
excited.
sometime towards the end of September. We're going to be covering a box set. I'm not going to say which box set we're going to cover. You'll know that it's not End of Civilization because I've already told you I'm not going to be covering that during this series. But it will be a box set. So I'll let you kind of guess which box set it's going to be. That's going to be coming out back end of September. Obviously, the next episode of the podcast you're going to be hearing will be for the sort of December announcements slash August releases. The August stuff has been shipping out over the past week. I got my stuff here 2 days ago, I want to say, and I'm in Ireland. So if you're in the UK listening, you probably already have it. If you pre-ordered in the States, you might get it sort of
Mm,
in a
sometime.
week's time, sometime in a
Yeah.
week's time. According to Chris, it's a little bit random as to how quickly after release the stuff arrives.
I
Um,
did have an Irish question for you.
okay.
So every time you've been talking about the vault, all I think about is those like Disney commercials because we're the same age as like when we were kids, and it'd be like, get it now before it goes back into the vault. Was that a thing in like the UK and Ireland? Like
Or
where
it goes
Disney
back
would
into
just like randomly take these things out and say, no, 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 this is gonna be your last chance to get it, or was that a thing?
not that I recall. No,
Okay.
not that
Okay.
I
I was just
recall. Maybe
curious. I remember,
subconsciously.
yeah, because like I remember it distinctly as a kid. Was those commercials that would always show on TV, like, and this was like VHS and early DVD era
Right. So
when
they're
they would
basically
do
saying,
this
get it
horrible practice.
now. Yeah, get it now. You'll never be able to see it again. Kind of a ad. It's a bit weird. No, I don't recall ever seeing that. It may be in the back of my brain subconsciously, but I don't recall
And it could
hearing
have
it.
just been a bad practice here. It's not like Disney's had weird distribution things throughout their
Yeah,
career.
yeah.
But
That's
I want to thank you, Adam, for having me on. I've had a great time, and feel free to invite me back anytime to talk about something.
absolutely. And if you wish to continue to hear Zach's Appalachian tones, like I said, we co-host another podcast called They Live by Film. We put episodes out every month. Just the most random shit possible. We've talked about everything from Otsu to Lars von Trier to Fast and Furious. We cover a little bit of everything over on They Live by Film. As I said, if you're listening to this episode when it's come out, there is literally a brand new episode of They Live by Film that's gone out the same day, where we cover some Fritz Lang movies. So feel free to hop on over there if you're looking for more stuff from myself and from Zach. As I said, in the meantime, I'll be back in early September for the next episode of releases, and then again a few weeks after that, then for a box set discussion. In the meantime, happy watching and take care.